Dolls. So much more than a young girl's best friend. These toys can become possessed or cursed, opening the way for dark forces beyond our understanding to wreak havoc for all in their wake. But for now though, it's time to get comfortable, keep those dolls away, and let the darkness take control. My uncle and aunt decided to leave the UK in the early 90s. They bought a shell of a farmhouse in very rural Umbria, Italy, and moved with their 3 young children. They basically camped in this house and very slowly made it habitable. Very quickly, strange things started happening. Pots and pans jumped off the hooks on the walls in the kitchen. My cousins woke up, but were paralyzed in their beds and felt a presence holding them down. My uncle woke up in the night, cold, and saw his bed sheets being dropped in the corner of the room, as if they had been picked up by an invisible hand. One day, my cousins were playing in the old tobacco tower in the garden, and heard someone calling their names from outside. Just as they ran outside, the roof collapsed, and there was no one calling them. This near-fatal accident was the last straw, and they asked people in the local town for advice. None of my family are religious, but Italy is very Catholic, and their only option seemed to be to hire a priest to do an exorcism. He came and he did his stuff, said prayers and scattered holy water, etc. The strange occurrences fortunately seemed to cease, and they got back to working on the house without having to fear for their safety. That is, of course, until one day, when my uncle was stripping back a wall to replaster it, he found a strange hollow inside the wall. He pulled away the rest of the plaster and found a small, crudely made doll inside. Incredibly creepy shit. My aunt had been told about an old lady in town who was rumored to dabble in the paranormal, so she took the doll to show her. The lady was seriously spooked and told my aunt that they had to send the doll away quickly. The best thing to do was to build a small boat and let the doll wash away down the river, once you had wished it a safe journey. My aunt and uncle still couldn't believe all this had happened, and it's been nearly 20 years since. They did as the lady said, and never had any trouble since then. They think it was a poltergeist, and the doll was some sort of cursed object that had been put inside the house in order for the poltergeist to persist. Years later, they found out that the name of the house, La Buia, is an old Italian word for the darkness. Finding that out was enough to convince us all that these old hippies hadn't just been sitting on their Umbrian hillside drinking too much wine. My mother loves going to garage and yard sales. If she can get craft supplies and not too shabby furniture for less than she would pay in store, she's a happy person for the day. She's come home with this huge brown box of random stuff. She'd got the box for just $2 and took the things she wanted out and gave the rest to me. There were some books and notebooks that I thought were cool. Most of the box, however, was junk. Half-used notebooks, CDs with scratches on the back, some old cookbooks from the 90s, but something was stuck to the corner at the bottom of the box. This box was easily 2 feet tall, to give a bit of an image for you. I pulled the item from the corner as it seemed to be stuck there, like there was some dry, sticky material or glue. And it was this weird little doll. I don't really know how to explain it, because I had never come across something like this. This happened in 2007, and all I had for a phone back then was this fake Razr from TracFone. So it wasn't like I could just take a video or picture. Anyway, the doll was about 3 to 4 inches tall and looked like a little Mexican/Native American girl. I remember looking at it and feeling drawn to it, like I wanted to check out every little piece. It had a few necklaces around its neck, with those cheap beads that you can get in any department/craft store, and they were blue, red, and yellow. The hair was odd. It didn't feel like yarn, and looked almost human. It had 2 black braids on its head that were tied with yarn, and it was wearing a little dress that was blue and red. It all looked handmade. The eyes were creepy. Just 2 black lines of thread, equidistant apart on the face, and the body was just round. The features were all added with accessories like the dress and hair, but the actual doll was just a lump of this tough netting-like material. It was really heavy for a tiny doll, but I thought it was cool and weird, and I was into that kind of stuff. When I lifted the dress, I saw a long needle about the length of the doll's body that was covered by the dress. I held to the doll through the netting, and I pulled the needle out, and it didn't have a hole for thread to go through at the top. So instead of adding it to my mum's sewing kit, I just stuck it about half into the body and went back to eat dinner. Now I have no idea if the 2 things were connected, but for the next 3 days, I was incredibly sick. I missed school for a week because I was just throwing up all day long, every few hours or so, and I hadn't gone anywhere or eaten anything unusual. Plus, none of my friends or family were sick at the time. It came seemingly out of nowhere. Anything I ate, I couldn't hold down, and after the throwing up stopped, I was so tired and run down, I had to use all my strength just to walk around the house. For about a year, I forgot the doll existed. Mum had stuffed it on a shelf on my room, surrounded by other random things I thought were cool, and life went on. I had met this girl at my high school who was into spirit communication, and she swore she could see spirits and auras. She and I became best friends over time, and one day, I had her over to my place after school. It was a normal day, and she was telling my mum what kind of pizza she wanted, as my parents were heading out to get dinner for everyone. After they left, she found the weird little doll and pulled it down from the shelf to show me. She asked me how I got it, and I said I had some pretty bad vibes about it. According to her, it actually tingled to the touch for her, and she didn't want to have it in her hands for too long. I told her what happened when I got it, and she was instantly alert. My parents called to say that they were actually going to go see a movie, which meant that we had the rest of the night to ourselves. During the course of our conversation, my friend suggested that we get rid of the doll, that it was full of negative energy, and she seemed genuinely creeped out at the sight of it. I agreed, and we took the doll out to my house's fire pit. I found some old matches, and we tried to light it on fire, but the damn doll wouldn't light. The dress seemed fireproof, but it was just cotton. We went back inside and found some paper, and wrapped the doll in the paper, and she lit it. And finally, the doll began to burn. We threw it in the fire pit, and my friend got pretty serious, and told me to say out loud that I wanted the negative energy and spirit connected to the doll to leave this house and to leave my family alone. I did. I had this weird power come over me, and my voice was stronger than I anticipated. The flames got bigger, and things got weirder. Inside the house, we heard my alarm go off, and my friend ran inside to find that my light was turned off, and that my alarm clock was blaring at 11 p.m. The rest of the house was lit up like we left it. So I turned on my light and quickly unplugged the alarm. I was turning around to leave when something else started beeping. I went back to my room with my friend right behind me, and we searched for whatever it was, scared out of our minds. Finally, after some digging, I found an old Tamagotchi that was beeping. It was so loud that you could hear it from outside the house, and nothing I did could stop the noise. My friend grabbed the toy and started to step on it, but the beeping just got more and more distorted. After taking turns to stomp the old toy, it finally broke and the beeping ceased. We gathered up the glass and plastic pieces and began walking back to the fire pit, where we were greeted with a smell that we couldn't get out of our noses. The hair on the doll was still burning, a slow flame that was oddly the only flame left. The rest of the doll had burnt, and we poked it with a stick to see the remains of the tiny dress. My friend went home, and I hugged my parents extra tight that night when they arrived. I went to bed scared and unable to process what had happened. I then had a vivid dream with people standing in black cloaks around my fire pit, the little doll in the fire pit, and they were chanting, "Bring her back, bring her back," and I found myself in tears, like someone had died and I had witnessed it. One of the cloaks turned to me and yelled at me to say "bring it back" 3 times, and I did as I was told, until the final time I woke up mid-sentence and realized it was morning. I went back out to the fire pit that morning to find nothing but those cheap coloured beads and 5 rusty nails all grouped together, like they were stuck or glued in a bundle. Over the next year, my dad lost his job, and my parents had to file Chapter 13, so they wouldn't lose their house due to credit card debt that they now couldn't pay. And my mum's car was smashed after she hit a deer while driving home. I have no idea if we did it right, or if we were just some creeped out 16-year-olds. But that was one of the scariest moments in my life. Everything I have said is true, and I will never forget this experience. When I was a kid, I would spend a lot of time in Texas with my brother, dad, and stepmom. Mainly just my brother and stepmom, because my dad was in the military and would frequently go on long trips, leaving us alone in whatever house we happened to be living in at the time. When I was about 5, we moved to a very large old Victorian house, 3 stories, not including the attic or the basement, and lots of rooms, which, as a little kid, I found very fun to explore. In the attic, however, there was a lot of old junk that the owners of the house were storing whilst we were renting it, including a huge collection of beautiful, handcrafted porcelain dolls. There were hundreds of them, lined up neatly on the back wall in a glass case, standing on their stands like an army ready for commands. And as a little girl who loved ribbons and bows and anything girly, I was entranced. One doll in particular stood out to me. Beautiful, red hair, green-eyed doll, in a blue silk dress with a matching ribbon. I begged my dad to let me play with her, and I felt the need to hold and love her, and have tea parties with her. He, of course, refused, saying that the dolls were worth more than what I could imagine, and he wanted his deposit back when he moved, not to mention the fact that they didn't even belong to us. He kept the door locked for good measure after catching me more than once, staring in awe at the doll. A month went by, and I had all but forgotten about the doll, choosing to simply explore the house and play in my basement room with my Barbies. Until one day when I came home from dropping my dad off at base, we found the red-haired doll sitting on my bed. I was ecstatic, thinking my dad had given me the doll and left it for me as a surprise, and proceeded to play with the doll every second of the day until my dad came home. As soon as my dad saw the doll, he flipped out and yelled at me, and spanked me, and took the doll away and locked it back up in the attic, and got more aggravated when he discovered that the attic door was still locked, and he was the only one to have a key. He couldn't figure out how I could have possibly picked the lock, and then repicked it to lock it. His solution was that I had somehow convinced my brother to do it for me. Another month went by, and my dad installed another lock on the attic, warning me and my brother what would happen if he found out that we had been in the attic again while he was gone. That very night when he returned, the doll sat on my bed again, leaving me wary of its presence. Something that had once made me so happy now made me cautious and anxious. I told my stepmom, who immediately became angry and slapped me and my brother, and tried to return the doll, only to find the attic door once again locked. She tore the house apart, trying to find the keys she was positive we had hidden, until giving up and locking the doll in her room. That night, my dad came home, and I was terrified, and he wouldn't speak to me or my brother at all, only giving a short speech about how we needed to go to our rooms and not come out. The next trip he made, we didn't see him off to the base. We sat in our rooms and had a quiet evening alone. I spent the night sulking and trying to figure out how the doll had gotten into my room. Later, well after I'd fallen asleep, I heard soft music playing from somewhere. It was a music box, and I felt something near my feet and thought it was my cat curled up, and reached down only to find that instead of fur, I had a handful of hair. I turned my light on and screamed. What looked like every doll from the attic was now in my room, sitting at my tea table, on my dollhouse, and positioned in standing positions on my bed, and in various parts of my room. My door slammed open, and my dad appeared in their doorway, where he had apparently been waiting for me to head to the attic to claim a doll. He took one look at them, grabbed me, and ran out of the house, dragging my brother and stepmom along with us. He refuses to speak of them to this day. The most important part of this story is the backstory of the red-haired doll. Apparently, the original builder and owner of the house had a daughter who died when she was about 8, and it was customary to make a doll of their likeness and make it out of their real hair and dress them in the same clothes the child wore. I think it was just that little girl, because I never felt like it was dangerous to play with the doll. I felt like she was lonely and just trying to make a friend. I'll try to make this as brief as possible. My housemate bought me a Gollywog doll for my birthday, I have no idea what possessed him to do it, as I am very politically correct, and they've always freaked me out. In retrospect, he was probably either doing it as a spite or as a gag. But he got his desired reaction, as I was very unhappy and, quite frankly, uncomfortable with it. I found it very unsettling, and so I left it on the bottom of a small pile of my birthday presents. Now, a lot of people will just say I should have thrown it away straight away, due to the fact that it's probably not a very good thing to own. But I lived with this friend at the time, and knowing that he had probably paid a fair amount of money for the gag gift, I opted to keep it, at the very least, until I moved out, and he wouldn't know that I had disposed of it. 2 nights later, I had the most bizarre dream, where the gollywog was in a blind rage and trying to kill me, because I hadn't given it a nice place to sit in the bedroom, and I hadn't given it any form of attention. When I woke up and spoke to my housemates about this, we all had a laugh. I mean, it was pretty funny at the time. This is, of course, until shit got a bit realer. This has been happening over the course of a fortnight, and a few things have occurred. There are instances of it moving by itself. Each account of it moving, I can assure you, there are few conceivable explanations, aside from one of my housemates doing it. We have all grilled each other about it continuously, and it has caused a lot of friction between us. It has gotten to the point where the funny part has worn off, and I feel like someone would have confessed by now. Here are some examples of it moving. I had a dream where the doll is on my bedroom floor under a pile of birthday presents. The next morning when I woke up, it is now on the other side of the room, right besides my bed. None of my housemates go into my room. I know that they respect my space, not to mention I'm quite a light sleeper, and would no doubt wake up at the slightest creak of my door opening. After this, I'm mildly freaked out, and my housemate agrees to take it to her room. Whilst it's in her room, I decide it will be a good opportunity to get away for a while. So I make plans and go away to Devon, England, for a camping trip, and come back to notice the doll on top of my wardrobe. I was slightly freaked out, but I assumed that my housemate wanted it out of her room. Maybe I was going mad, but I got the sense that it was getting closer to the edge of the wardrobe. As the days went on, its eyes seemed to be a bit more visible. I eventually pushed it back, so that it was right against the wall, so that I could no longer see its face from my bed. My housemate noticed the doll was on top of my wardrobe, and started freaking out, and got my other housemates in, and we all launched into a Spanish Inquisition. Because the whole house knows that I'm weird about personal space, and they know that I don't like people going in my room, especially when I'm away. And B, someone is clearly trying to mess with everybody. When everyone swears that they haven't done a thing, the housemate who took it before takes it away and puts it on a toolbox on the living room floor. We go and watch a movie together, go downstairs together, and the whole time, nobody left the room, and no one could have snuck away. When we went upstairs, the doll had moved off the toolbox and was lying on the ground, on its back. Now the toolbox is perfectly flat, and there is absolutely no explanation. Between that happening, it has moved to the toolbox, onto a box on top of the table. There are always a lot of boxes, as we're planning on leaving soon. And then from there, to another box about 6 feet away. The friend who took the doll for the night also woke up covered in these weird little scratches on her face and body the next day. If this were anyone else, I would hear this and scoff, and disregard it as a very poorly written creepypasta. But I just want someone to know. I don't really believe in the paranormal, but the way my housemates are beginning to react makes me wonder if there is something really weird going on. We have never played a joke like this before, but we have been known to pull pranks on each other. But not like this. This seems completely out of character for all of them, particularly because one of my housemates is genuinely distressed by it, and she is a terrible actor. All of this started a couple of months ago. My friends and I have this tradition where we celebrate birthdays and we get each other one nice gift and then one gag gift. One day, a few weeks before my friend Anna's birthday, I was in a thrift shop and I found the ugliest doll I had ever seen. It was from the 50s or 60s and had huge wide eyes and a horrible bowl cut on its head. It was also torn up and dirty from being so old. In short, it was a really ugly and honestly pretty creepy doll. Not to mention, Anna hates dolls and has always been creeped out by them. So I thought it would be the perfect gag gift. When I brought it home, my mum was immediately unsettled by it and asked me to store it in the back of the basement for the next few weeks, so she wouldn't have to look at it. I obliged, but then promptly forgot about it until long after Anna's birthday. The doll kept sitting in the basement for 3 months or so, until we cleaned out the storage room. I took the doll out and ended up moving it to the upstairs hall closet. The hall closet happens to be across from my brother's bedroom. I never told him I moved the doll near to it, because it wasn't worth mentioning. But the very next day, my brother began complaining that there was someone tapping on his bedroom door in the middle of the night. We laughed it off and blamed it on the wind rattling the door, or something. But time passed, and tappings kept happening each night, even when we closed all the windows. By this point, my brother had searched the closet for clues as to what was happening, and found the doll. He was super unsettled, and felt that the doll was the one knocking. So to appease him, I moved the doll downstairs to the main floor. Immediately, he insisted the knocking had stopped. What was unsettling, though, was that my mother, whose bedroom is on the main floor, began complaining about hearing skittering footsteps at night. She thought maybe we had rats, but we searched and found no signs of any infestation. By this point, my whole family was noticing the links between the weird stuff and the doll, so my mum begged me to get rid of it. However, my dad, always a skeptic, laughed at us and jokingly set the doll on display in a shelf on the wall that held books and knickknacks. The next morning I was home alone, when I heard a crashing coming from the other room. I was terrified, but slowly crept into the room to see what had happened, only to find everything on the shelf had somehow fallen to the ground. Everything but the doll. I'm no stranger to the paranormal. I've seen and heard things that just cannot be explained in any logical sense. I'll start this story when I was about 5 or 6, some time ago, as I am now 25. But believe me when I say that these events will forever be clearly burnt into my brain until the day I die. When I was young, my mother would drop me off at my great-aunt's house on her way to work. It was honestly like a second home to me, and I loved my aunt dearly. But the events that unfolded would make me wary about staying in that house. On this day, my mum had dropped me off as usual and tucked me into bed in the spare room, kissed me goodbye, and left. Now I have a really hard time falling asleep in other people's homes, even my family's homes. So it wasn't odd for me to just stay awake and to lay in bed until my aunt woke up just a few hours later, as it was quite early in the morning when my mum would drop me off. Now to explain the room that I'm lying in. It was a smallish room with the bed in one corner and a small closet on the other side, a few dressers and such, and windows at the foot of the bed, and along the upper wall there was a long shelf completely covered in my aunt's late daughter's stuffed animals and figurines. I'll go into a bit more detail on my aunt's daughter a bit later, as I feel like she played a pivotal role in happenings before this occurrence. I'm allowing myself to just take in all the toys and stuff around the room, as I usually did, just admiring the things I wasn't allowed to touch or play with, when my eyes landed on a porcelain baby doll in a pink dress. Nothing super unusual about the doll, other than it's old and had been there a long time. It's one of those lifelike dolls of a small baby. She was a possible collector doll, and she was smiling, with only 2 front teeth exposed. Cute, yes, and a little unsettling at the same time. At this point, she's got both arms down by her sides and is facing away from me, towards the window. As I looked at her and was about to shift my focus elsewhere, her head turned towards me, and one of her arms raised in my direction, with her body slightly shifting in my direction, almost like it were waving at me. But it made no more moves after that. I froze. This was a porcelain doll, no batteries, and there was no way it could move of its own accord. I couldn't move. I was frozen in fear. But the doll didn't move again, so I lay there in bed, petrified, with only the blanket up to my nose to protect me. A few minutes later, I hear my aunt wake up in the room down the hall, and she comes into the spare bedroom to check on me. I run to her and immediately tell her what happened with the doll. Luckily, my aunt is very, very open to supernatural happenings. She and her husband have seen and heard things throughout the house themselves, but had never witnessed the doll move. I remember being in her arms as she went to check it out, and you could clearly see where the doll had been by the dust on the shelf. She immediately took it and put it away for a few years in the shed that she had up back. I honestly thought I was crazy, and just shut this out of my mind. Fast forward a few years. My aunt had taken the doll out of storage and placed it back in her room. My little cousins, similar to me at that age, would be left by their mums and taken care of by my aunt when they were working. My littlest cousin at the time was too young to sleep in the room, so she was sleeping in the room with my aunt. My oldest cousin was sleeping in the spare bedroom. A few minutes after their mother had left, my oldest cousin starts screaming and runs out of the room to find my aunt. She's yelling that the doll has moved, and looked at her. I instantly froze and asked, "The one that's in the pink dress?" And she can only nod through her sobbing. My aunt shushes us and promptly moves the doll into Anna's old room, which is to the right of the spare bedroom. Nothing else happened for a while, and my oldest cousin forgets about what happened and everything seems fine, until my youngest cousin one day ventures into Anna's room, where the doll had been placed. She comes flying into the living room moments later, crying. The doll had looked at her too. It was at that point I knew I wasn't crazy at all. It hadn't been a trick of the light or my eyes going funny. There was just something about that damn doll. At this point, my aunt is fed up and locks the doll in storage for a long time. She does eventually bring it back to the house again when we're all much older, and I still hate that thing to this day. But it hasn't taken any more glances at us or anyone else since. I don't know why my aunt kept it. Sentimental value, I suppose, but I personally would have incinerated it. Now, sometime after all of this, my mum tells me a story that I believe links to the odd activity that has happened in my aunt's house. Whether or not it all definitely ties together, I'll probably never know for sure. But it seems too coincidental to me. I'll let you be the judge. She told me this when I was about 14, when we were driving home one day. I'm not really sure what prompted her to tell me, but here it is. My mother was about 17 at the time, and was hanging out with her cousins, my great-aunt's daughter Anna and her sister Susan. They'd gotten a hold of a Ouija board, one of those super old wooden ones, with a matching wooden planchette. My aunt must have been out of the house that day, as there was no way she'd have let them play with that stuff in her house. She can be very superstitious of stuff like that, and I take her side. Anyway, they're playing with the thing in the spare bedroom. It's dark, and they've lit a few candles, and Anna is leading the Ouija board conversation. It should also be noted that Anna was very into the paranormal. She believed in ghosts and the like, and even had multiple volumes on the stuff in her personal library. And they're reaching out, trying to contact someone beyond the veil, when a man named George starts talking through the board. Anna asked if he was a nice man, and the planchette immediately moved to no. They ask what he did, and the board spelt out kill. They're all a little too spooked, but being teenage girls, they all think the other is pulling some sort of prank, and start asking questions that provoke the spirit. It escalates to a point where some of the candles are blown out when asked, and a glass had been tossed across the room. They're all a bit panicky at this point, but are more so intrigued, and continue asking questions. My mum decides to ask George out loud, "Is there anything you'd like to say to us?" The planchette goes to yes. She then proceeds to say, "I give you permission to talk through me." Dumbest thing to say to an irate spirit. Anyway, my mum says she blacked out at that point, and she only knows of what happened later when Anna told her. My mum had apparently gone rigid and pale white. Anna says her face began to shift. "It wasn't you," she tells my mother later. "I knew it wasn't, and so I told it to leave. That I wasn't allowed here, and just to go back to wherever I had come from. And it took Anna and Susan several minutes to banish the thing that was slowly taking over my mum. But eventually it left, and left my mum gasping for air." My aunt had returned home at this point, and the girls were absolutely terrified, as I'm sure anyone would be. They told my aunt everything, and of course she was furious. She calls my mum's mum to come pick her up, and she sends my mum away with the Ouija board. My grandma came and took her home, tossing the board in the trunk, and my mum proceeds to tell my grandma everything that happened. Grandma is also a believer, and is quite shaken. When they get home, my grandma lit a bonfire, one of those large metal drum ones, and tossed the board in. My mum says that sparks shot out of the drum and almost hit Grandma in the face, almost as if they had a mind of their own and were purposefully trying to get her. Later on, the night winds down and everyone's ready for bed. My mum goes to her closet to get some pajamas, and there, sitting on top of her clothes, is the damn board. Not a scorch mark or blemish on it. My mum is freaked out and confused, and she runs to find her mum and asks her why she put the thing back in her closet. She says, "I thought you burnt it." "I did," says Grandma, pretty shaken herself. Instead of trying to destroy it again, Grandma takes it and puts it on the top of her closet, where it can collect dust and be forgotten. My mum never saw it again, and it wasn't spoken of until she told the story when I was 14. I was freaked out. That spare bedroom and the house had never really been the same since they got messed around in. Things would be moved or go missing, only to show up in odd places. My aunt eventually called for a priest to bless the house, and things seemed okay for a while. Fast forward a few years, Anna suffers a critical asthma attack and dies in hospital. Naturally, everyone is very torn up over her sudden death, especially my aunt. She kept Anna's room in the same condition, kept all of her belongings and such, and eventually moving some into the spare bedroom in the later years, as a remembrance of sorts. My mum found out she was pregnant with me after Anna's death, and when she did go visit Anna at the cemetery to tell her good news, as they were both very close and like sisters, and Anna had always loved children and would have been thrilled of being an auntie. Now that being said, I had of course never met Anna, and when I was able to start walking and getting around by myself, my mum and aunt would notice that I'd look into odd corners of the house and smile at nothing. When I was able to talk, barely though, as I was still small, they said I would talk to thin air and smile as if I were playing with someone. My mum, curious, picks me up one day and takes me over to a portrait of Anna. My aunt didn't like to speak to her for good reason. I can only imagine the pain she felt when she lost her daughter. So I'd never been told of Anna, or had any idea of who the portrait was. My mum asked me, "Do you know who that is?" I looked at the portrait and smiled. "That's Anna. She comes and talks and plays." They were shocked, of course, but probably a little happy at the same time, knowing she was still around and coming to visit her niece from time to time. I don't remember much of this now as an adult. Those memories have long since faded. It was a few good years later, when I was about 5, when the doll incident occurred. I'm not sure if it was George's doing, or if it was even Anna, as I was told she loved playing practical jokes. But I doubt it was her. She always gave me a warm feeling of love. When the doll had moved on its own accord, I felt cold. Malice even. I'm not sure exactly what's going on in that house. Like I said before, I'll let you be the judge. But even now, at the age of 25, I get the creeps any time I'm near the spare bedroom, or any time I'm near that damned doll. I've always been fascinated with haunted items, but never found the courage to buy one until recently. I purchased a haunted doll on eBay. The doll's name was Violet, and she didn't have a crazy backstory. She had long blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, and she was the perfect choice, or so I thought. Violet arrived in my mailbox on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She looked even more beautiful in person than in pictures. I was so excited to have her in my possession, and eager to see if I would experience anything paranormal. As a result, of owning her. I had no idea what I got myself into. I sat Violet on my antique dresser in my bedroom. I went about my day like normal. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. I went to bed and woke up next morning. Still nothing. But the next night, everything changed. I went to bed around my usual time, and during the night, I heard a very loud noise. I live in an apartment building, so I just assumed it was the people above me causing a ruckus. I shut my eyes and drifted back to sleep. The next morning, however, I woke up and looked directly at Violet. Her legs were crossed. I did not cross her legs, and no one else had been in my apartment to rearrange her. I freaked out a bit, but thought about it, and said to myself that there was a slight chance I could have done it and forgotten about it. But was my mind playing tricks on me? I wasn't sure. So I prepared myself for work and left. When I arrived home that evening, I went back to my bedroom to relax. This time, Violet's legs were uncrossed. I had not uncrossed them. I had left them crossed and did not touch her in the slightest. What was happening? How was a doll crossing and uncrossing their legs on its own? Was I losing my mind? I went to bed that night with worry. I was worried about what would I wake up to. Would Violet's legs be in a different position? Or would something else would have changed instead? Or would everything be the same? And I really was just going a bit gaga. I woke that morning to the sound of my alarm buzzing, and immediately I looked over to my dresser. Violet wasn't there. I live alone, and know for a fact that no one had been in my apartment. The chain on my door, and the fact that my windows are high up and nobody can climb in, are a testament to that. I jumped out of my bed and started looking all around my room. I glanced over my bed, and Violet was there. Violet was laying in my bed, staring up at the ceiling. Had she been in my bed all night? How did she get there? I ran out of my bedroom. I didn't bother to shower. I just threw on some clothes and left. I needed to seriously contemplate what I was going to do with her. So I tried contacting the lady, realizing that I had gotten well over my head with this doll. I explained to her that I was either losing my mind or that there was something very wrong with this doll. When I bought the haunted doll as advertised, I didn't expect her to move. I honestly expected it to be more of a joke. Although, as I do believe in the paranormal, a part of me did want something to happen. But honestly, I really wasn't anticipating that. She told me, after a few hours of waiting, that she had an absolutely no returns policy, but did however wish me the best of luck in trying to pass her on. I am seriously stumped. I don't know what to do with her. I mean, she's interesting, and it's cool upon reflection to think that she can move her legs, even though it was a bit creepy. But when I found her in my bed, I nearly dropped a brick. I honestly can't explain the terror that surges through your body when your eyes fall upon her visage, silent and motionless, staring up at the ceiling in your bed, with there being no logical explanation for how that occurred. I don't know what I'm going to do with her, as I said before. Maybe someone will take her if I give her away. I'd rather lose a few $100s, to be honest. So if anyone's interested in buying Violet, let me know. But for the meantime, I'll give you a piece of advice. Don't purchase a haunted doll on eBay. I used to be really close friends with a girl who was the daughter of one of my dad's old co-workers. I always came over to her apartment complex, and we'd play with a tire swing that we put together. I think we were both around 7 to 10 years old during this time, but every time we hung out, it was always outside. We'd walk around the area, play jump rope, swing, as well as other things. I never really had been inside her house, except for on the occasional birthday party, but was usually only in the living room area. One day, I finally built up the courage to ask her why we never played in her room, since I was so curious what her room looked like compared to mine. She just looked at me, so shocked by what I had just said, and shook her head. I thought it was strange. It's just a room. Maybe it was a mess, and didn't want me to see it. I decided to drop the topic, and a few days later, there was a birthday party. I was in the living room area, and I could see 3 doors in the hallway. One of them was obviously her parents', then her brother's, but then her room. Which door was it? I walked into the hallway and looked at the doors. I was about to open one when she came out of nowhere and grabbed my hand. She pulled me outside by the old swing that we made and told me why she didn't want me in her room. She said to me that a ghost lived there. I'm not going to say I didn't believe in ghosts, because I've had some crazy experiences, especially when I was around that age. But I never got any creepy vibes in her home. She said she'd rather spend as much time outside of her room as possible, because it's scary to be in there, and that her parents didn't believe her. Although we were the same age, she acted really childish compared to me, so a part of me felt that it was just her imagination. To comfort her, I said I'd go into her room and scare the ghosts away, so that she could sleep peacefully at night. She seemed really happy after that, so she stayed by the swing, while I went back inside to apparently fight off a ghost. As I headed back into the hallway, I slowly opened the first door, and what I see is not some horror beyond the grave, but an average little girl's room. I know most people will say they get a creepy vibe or feel like they're being watched, or that the room felt cold, but I felt absolutely fine. I opened her closet, looked under her bed, and found nothing spooky. I scanned around the room, analyzing everything, until my gaze was set on this really lifelike looking doll, sitting by her bed on a tiny dresser. I don't know why I felt so fascinated by it, but I couldn't take my gaze off it. I felt like I was being pulled closer to it. It had such realistic blue eyes and details. It just sat there with its legs dangling off the edge of the dresser, staring at me. I wanted to pick it up, and I kid you not, its left leg actually lifted up and touched my knee. I actually saw its leg move. My eyes widened, and I ran out of the room. I'm surprised I didn't let out a scream. My first instinct was just to get the hell out of there. When I saw her, I right away told her about what happened, and she ran back, shut her door, and poured salt at the bottom of the door. I'm not sure if it was just me being paranoid, but I could swear I heard things moving in her room as she did all that. She fell asleep in the living room that night, And after that, I never saw her again. Because my dad had a falling out with that co-worker. To this day, I wonder how she's doing, and if she ever got rid of that cursed doll. My niece got a little doll as a gift last year. It was from a family member who had a not-so-good reputation with us. That person has tried to use local witchcraft stuff towards my family in the past. Not that I believe much about it, but it's still my family. So my sister accepted it, and we took the doll home. Everything was fine before that in the house. My bedroom is located next to the living room, while the others are a little bit far away, which requires crossing the living room and the hallway. I only come home for holidays. I had been there for a week, and everything was normal. I get to hear a lot of noises coming from the upper floor. We have a dog there, and from the neighbours because my mum is directly above their backyard. The night we bought the doll, everything was quiet. It was the day after New Year, and everybody was sleeping after the celebrations, and I was on my laptop talking to some friends, when suddenly I hear footsteps right outside my bedroom. It didn't bother me, because it could have been my sister's husband. They were heavy footsteps, like boots or men's shoes. It sounded like they were crossing the hallway. Then the living room, and finished on the kitchen. Immediately I heard the water on in the kitchen sink, running, and the sound of dishes being washed. It's odd because it was 1:15 a.m., but it could have been someone washing the baby bottles. I kept on listening. After 5 minutes, I heard my niece's playground being dragged from the hallway where it was kept to the living room. It makes a very distinct noise, and I'm 100% sure that that was what I heard. The noise kept going on for a good 10 minutes or so, and I wrote to my sister to find out if everything was fine, but got no response. After that, I kept hearing these footsteps. My dog was very nervous, and barked at me when I tried to open the door to check out what was happening. So, I opted to stay in the room. I checked the time. It was 1:43, and the sounds were still going, until they suddenly stopped. I went to sleep, trying not to think about it. The next morning, my sister calls me on the phone, and tells me to get out of my room. I did. I went to the hallway, and my mum, sister, and her husband were there. My sister asked me if I had put my niece's stroller in front of her bedroom, and if I had moved the playground station. I said no, and told them all about the noises. I thought they weren't going to believe me, but it turns out that when my sister came out of her bedroom in the morning, she found the stroller moved. She put it right in its place, and went to get the baby bottles and went back to the room. After that, her husband got out to drink some water, and found the stroller again in front of the door, moved it, and on his way back asked my sister why she had put the stroller in front of their bedroom door. They noticed there was something very weird about the situation, saw my texts from last night, and decided to call me. We started to freak out a bit, and I randomly grabbed the doll that was on the stroller, and I noticed a strong smell emanating from it, like dry saliva. It was nauseating. It wasn't there the night before, and nobody had touched the damn thing. It should have still been in the gift bag. My sister's husband got scared about the fact and decided to throw the doll away immediately. And after that night, everything was calmed down again. I live in Las Vegas, Nevada, which is where Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum is. This past weekend, my sister came to visit. We're both interested and intrigued by the paranormal, and we also both love watching his show, Ghost Adventures. I thought it would be a fun and interesting thing to do, so we decided to take a tour. A few months earlier, I took my mum, and neither of us had any kind of experience. I figured that this would be the same, but still fun to do. So during the tour guide took us to a room where Zach keeps a haunted doll named Peggy. Before the guide let us see her, she was explaining the forces behind her. They say to never look in the eyes, and they also have a device to communicate with her, if you so choose. When my mum and I took the tour a few months earlier, we decided that we wanted to see the doll. No biggie, and nothing strange happened. But this time, we were standing outside of Peggy's room, when out of nowhere, I began to feel lightheaded. I started to feel dizzy, and my heart began pounding ridiculously fast, the way it does when you become uncontrollably ill or pass out. I became extremely emotional and felt like I was going to burst into tears uncontrollably. I told the tour guide that I wasn't feeling well and needed to use the restroom. She quickly took me down the hall, and my sister followed in tow to make sure that I was okay. As soon as I got to the restroom, all those feelings subsided. I sat down and took a few minutes just to calm down, but felt much better as soon as I had gone away from that room. We went back out with the group and continued the tour. The tour guide explained that she had seen similar things happen to people on the tour, but sometimes it was more intense. It's not exactly the most chilling experience, and although I am a bit skeptical about the paranormal, I'm not one to make anything up in order to be dramatic. I've been thinking about it for the past few days, and I can't decide if it was the evil nature of the doll, or if the feeling came from the forces of good watching me, telling me to get away from it. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I'd like to give a huge thank you to the brave subscribers who sent in their stories to make this video possible. It's been a video that I've wanted to do for a long time, and it's taking me about a year to get the stories I needed to make it happen. So I'm really glad with how it turned out, and I hope that you enjoyed the stories too. Which, if of course you did, it would really help me out if you could drop a like and leave a comment in the comments section with your thoughts, as it goes a long way and is very much appreciated. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the little bell icon to be up to date with everything I post, and not to miss your daily dose of creepiness. If there's a story that you would like to share with me, whether it be about dolls or not, all that you need to do is post it to my Reddit or send it to my email. But anyway, for now guys, I'm gonna sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.